Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we'll be doing part 101 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we took a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about, and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. So, yeah, today we've got quite a cool assortment. We've got a lot of really interesting things today in terms of, non-dinosaurs, so it's quite cool. But we've also got your typical dinosaurs as well. You got to have Jurassic World, dinosaurs are kind of the whole thing, which is awesome. But yeah, let's get stuck into it now. We're going to be starting off with Gushy Gore, who's remade the Simosuchus. So these are a few species I've already covered before, so I'll give a quicker rundown and then just go over some of the changes and things. But yeah, we'll have a look at them. So here's Simosuchus. So here he is, the funky boy. We'll pick one to talk about as we always do. I like that one with the grey on it. I think that one just speaks. Oh, that one just speaks to me. I don't know. We'll just have a little looky low. I quite like him. Let's have a look at you. He looks like a goofy goober. I like goofy goobers. Anyway, so this is Simosuchus. Let me grab it in. We'll zoom in a bit. That's as much as he'll zoom in. Anyway, so Simosuchus, these guys are an extinct genus of Notosuchian crocodiliform. So they're not that closely related to modern crocodiles, but they're in the same group. They're in a group that lived pretty much exclusively, I think there may have been some Cenozoic ones, but mostly in the Mesozoic. And they were very interesting. They took a lot of different niches. They're almost like mammal crocs. Like you hear things like a rat croc or duck croc or bull croc as well, things like that. Those are mostly Notosuchians, which are a really interesting group of crocodilians. And these guys came from Madagascar, and they were, as I mentioned, still just as weird as a lot of those crocodilians. They were very small for crocodilians. They got to about 2.5 feet long, or like not even quite a meter, so not very big. And they can see they've got this very bulldog-shaped snout, which is they get their name Pug Croc as well, because they got that very short snout. And these guys come from Madagascar, so they lived with things like Moanasaurus and things like that. And in the Mahajanga Formation. And what really makes it weird as well, you can see those teeth. They look shaped like maple leaves. And these are very not similar to other crocodilians. You have those conical teeth for hunting prey. These guys were actually believed to be herbivores. So they would have been herbivorous. And the first sort of specimens were found in 2000 and is actually quite well known. So we have a pretty good idea of what this guy looked like. So this really helps. And I think it's cool that Gushigori remastered it because this actually much more accurately reflects Simosuchus. They've got that pug-nosed crocodile. That's their kind of name, Simosuchus in Greek. They may also have sexual dimorphism as well, with some difference in specimens. They got this very kind of big, bulky arms there they would have used to dig. So they're pretty much like a groundhog kind of analog. That's probably the best comparison I can think of, or a marmot, something sort of like that with a short tail. And it is mentioned a Notosuchian. It is close relatives with Libasuchus and Malawisuchus, which are all kind of very interesting kind of group of Notosuchians. And yes, Notosuchians does include Crabrasuchus and those are probably more famous examples that you've probably heard of. And the Sebekids are also Notosuchians, so that's what I mentioned about the Cenozoic ones, because those Sebekids lived into the Cenozoic. As I mentioned, they are believed to be herbivores, very similar to iguanas. And they were fully terrestrial, so unlike modern crocodiles, which are mostly semi-aquatic, these guys tend to be a lot more running around on the ground and doing that. And with their anatomy, it's actually quite suggests that they were fossorial or kind of dug as well. And yeah, it's kind of similar, as I mentioned, to that kind of groundhog kind of ecology as well. And would have lived with animals that all like Majungasaurus or Petasaurus. A Dalatherium, so the formation it lived in was actually very, very interesting. And yeah, this is much better, accurately reflects what Simosuchus actually looked like, because the original one was basically just saltwater crocodile Planet Zoo model morphed to look like a pug croc. But this is actually, yeah, got the anatomy a lot better down. So you can see it's got that pug snout done perfectly. But really the best thing is the armor. So we know it kind of had these big osteoderm plates kind of on the back there. And these almost like, it didn't have, the scoots and stuff like a modern crocodile would to help with swimming. They kind of had these big, you can see big rectangular block scales coming down the tail. And that would have been, to help with armor as well. And they also got these patches on the legs there, that would discourage any predator from trying to knock the legs as well. So, very good protection. And also, one thing as well, the often we think, oh, yeah, protection, but crocodiles also use their osteoderms for thermoregulation. So that could probably, be another way they could have had these osteoderms to better regulate their body temperature. So that's quite cool. And yeah, a little herbivorous little guy, quite cool. And I love the colours it comes with. You can see that one I quite like there. This one's quite cool. They did a really good job, and it's nice to see a proper Simosuchus. I do quite like these little guys, and they deserve some love. So I'm really excited to see this one get a little bit of a remaster. So yeah, we're going to let the Simosuchus run away and do its thing, done by Gushy Gore. Next up, we got by Netraptor and Trippy. We've got another animal that we've covered. I love a Netraptor mod. We have got their Fukuiraptor. Is it releasing? Oh, it's because they're still on the way. That's fine. At least they know to get out of the way. But anyway, we didn't get the... oh, it does that again. We didn't get the animation, but that's fine, because of course... it's just the same as the Australovenator one. And you can see this is a really nice actually pose for it. I quite like this one. So this is Fukuiraptor, I mean. Not Fukuiraptor, different species. These guys are a genus of medium-sized Megaraptoran from the early Cretaceous, from the Brahminian-Aptian, and is from Japan. It is known from the Chiodani Formation and possibly around the Subiyoshi Formation, and is now considered one of the more basal most Megaraptorans. So that includes things like Maib and Australovenator. So that actually considered a sister taxon to Australovenator. So the type specimen is a partial skeleton that was discovered in Chiodani Quarry near Kusayama in the Fuki province. I'm going to forgive you, I'm not going to pronounce it Japanese. I am not a big anime fan. I barely have anything to do with Japanese. I just like sushi. That's basically me. So forgive me for my pronunciation. Even though the specimen was not mature, the adult may have been larger, and other remains have been found in the quarry of other individuals. However, the other individuals suggest they're actually smaller than the holotype. So even though the holotype's not an adult, it's still larger than most of the other specimens found. So we don't know how big they got. And indicated by its slender phalanges, it was actually a relatively lightly built animal. The immature specimen was about 4.2 meters or 4 feet long and about 175 kilograms. The holotype is an estimate, and the other kind of larger one suggests maybe about 14 feet or 3 meters and 590 kilograms. So it is kind of on the smaller side, but again, it is a juvenile or immature, so we're not going to know how big the adult is until we find an adult. In terms of its distinct teeth, it actually has very interesting teeth. It has very much similarities between Eucharodontosaurids that are very compressed blade-like teeth, and Tyrannosaurids having blood grooves near the serrations. So that's kind of muddies the waters to tell who they're related to. And actually, it was originally considered Dromaeosaur. I think I've covered that interpretation. Then it was considered to be a Carnosaur, related to Allosaurus, though more recent studies suggest it's a Neovenatorid. And then even more recently, another analysis has proposed that all Megaraptorans are actually Tyrannosaurids. So these guys are Tyrannosauroid Coelurosaur, and suggest it's kind of related to things like Australovenator as well. So it's kind of suggested where its closest relatives lie, which is interesting as well. But yeah, the Chiodani Formation is a very rich formation in dinosaurs. It may have lived with dinosaurs like Fukuiosaurus, Fukuiotitan, Fukuiovenator, some Dinosaurs, Hadrosaurid Cornuciosaurus, other ornithischians. Fukuiosaurus is a ornithischian, Hadrosaurid, and then you have the sauropods with Fukuiotitan. It's a very rich formation filled with all sorts of quite cool animals. So yeah, let's have a look at this cool guy. Definitely a big fan. I like the red on that one. Red's my favorite color, so I always like seeing red on these things. Bloody amazing. Big fan. Alright, so we're gonna let them run off and do their thing. So next up, we're gonna have a look at some aquatic animals. And what we're gonna do first is close the park, because I hate when people are in my park, because they get stinky. Anyway, we're gonna have a look at LUCA. So this is a very interesting one. You're not going to see much, but this one's more of a fun mod, but I want to talk about it because it's very important in our evolution. I know it's not much to look at, but it is based off the Mosasaurus for the funnies. But that is LUCA, so we'll have a little look there. We'll actually just watch it swim, just to keep it more entertaining and have a look at things. So this is LUCA. So LUCA is the last universal common ancestor. So it's that's the acronym. So it's the hypothesized common ancestor cell from which the three domains of life, which is bacteria, so things like E. coli and all that, Archaea, which is another really cool group of single-celled organisms, and eukaryotes, that is everything from mushrooms to, it takes pretty much everything from animals, from blue whales to mushrooms to, other plants as well. So pretty much anything that's multicellular, so, plants, trees, and animals, plants, animals, fungus, all them, they all can date their ancestry down to LUCA. And LUCA isn't an actual proven thing, it's the hypothetical ancestor, because we know that all life on Earth has a common ancestor, so this is kind of near it. This is the last universal common ancestor between all modern lineages. It originated, which was believed to come from. The cell had a lipid bilayer, and it possesses a genetic code and ribosomes, which translates from DNA to RNA into proteins. And even though LUCA, the timing of it cannot be definitely constrained, most studies suggest LUCA existed about 3.5 billion years ago, so it's definitely definitely the oldest animal on this series so far. We'll say an animal, but living thing on this series. And potentially as early as 4.3 billion years ago. So that's pretty much the same age as the Earth itself. And the nature or the point of stage divergence, it's a completely hypothetical animal or hypothetical creature thing. Living organisms, so it is very much, it's not actually proven on a fossil or anything, so we can't know exactly that much about it. It's hypothetical. All kind of earlier forms of life predating this divergence, and all exact organisms are generally thought to have common ancestry. It is not the first universal common ancestor, or FUCA. That's the ancestor of LUCA. So FUCA is the first universal common ancestor, and LUCA is the last one. So it's the hypothetical non-cellular ancestor to LUCA and its other non-extinct sister lineage, now extinct sister lineages. And whether the genesis of virus falls before or after LUCA is another very big question, because viruses need hosts to reproduce. So that's kind of a very interesting question as well. And as I mentioned, why no fossil evidence of LUCA exists, the detailed biochemistry or biochemical similarity to all current life, divided by the three domains, as I mentioned, bacteria, Archaea, Archaea, and eukaryotes, which includes, all animals and plants and fungus. Makes its existence widely accepted among biochemists. So even if we don't have a fossil of it, we know it existed because we all know they were related eventually, so there had to be something. So LUCA's kind of the placeholder until we're not going to find a fossil unless we look for through a microscope. But yeah, that's kind of the one. It's proven through our genetics and our biochemistry. And its characteristics can be inferred from shared features of modern genomes, and these genes developed describe a complex life form with many co-adapted features, including transcription and translation mechanics to convert DNA and mRNA to proteins. So it's kind of quite important there. It's we don't know much about it. There's hypotheses it could have come from a hydrothermal vent, could have started at the bottom of the ocean. And it is the root, as I mentioned, of all life. It's kind of a very interesting concept, and I'm honestly not that well versed in it. I'm definitely more of an animal person, so this is kind of a bit out of my wheelhouse, but I thought it's just such an interesting concept to put in the game as well, so I'm just going to lay it out there for you. If you know, Wikipedia does a really good job at it, and yeah, hope you guys like this mod, even though you can't even see it. But I thought it was a fun one, you know, something fun, and I get to talk about something a bit out of my wheelhouse, which is always fun. But that was done by Pizza Otter. Pizza Otter does a really good job at making funky mods and funky things that I get to look at, which I'm always excited to. So next up, we're going a little bit further. We're going to the Silurian instead of the Hadean period. We're going to have a look at a really cool crustacean, Ainiktozoon. I believe you say that. So let's have a look at one done by JWE2. Let's have a look at you guys. Let's let you run up. Swim, 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 swim. So this funky little guy here. So we can find... I like the red one. The red one's my favorite. Red's always been my favorite color. We'll have a look at one to choose. Let's see. Who should we pick? Oh, I'll pick you, because you're in the best light. Look at this beautiful little guy. Just gotta... No, I'll pick this one. This one's in a better light. I'll just gotta get good. It's probably the best I'm gonna get. It sucks with these tiny mods. Anyway, so this is Ainiktozoon loganese. This is Logan's enigmatic animal. So basically, you know, that's kind of the Latin name for it. So this is a fossil arthropod from the Silurian. So this is, you know, Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, Permian. So that's the Paleozoic. From Scotland. So it was found in the Bird's Nose site as part of the Patrick Byrne Formation near Lammerschore. And it was originally described as an early chordate. So a chordate is basically anything from a hagfish to a hyacinth macaw. It is kind of something that's got, you know, like a little things like jawless fishes and upwards. But recent studies actually find that it is definitely an arthropod and is actually more closely related to the Lacocephalian crustaceans, which were a very interesting group. It was a kind of a pouch head. They were a very interesting group of arthropods that basically had like one giant eye and funky heads. They had a large flattened carapace and had a large compound eye that joined into one. And they had quite a good run. Those Thylacocephalians lasted from the Silurian to the Cretaceous. So they had a pretty good run in terms of, you know, how long they live for. And there's 30 different species. Very, very cool. So hopefully we get to see more of them in the future. It's a group that I'd love to talk about a little bit more. So yeah, we'll let them swim off, do their thing. Done by JWE2. Next up, we've got a mod done by someone who hasn't been around for a hot minute. Mayo has given us another really cool mod. We have got Eurhinosaurus. That's another cool one here. Let's see if we can get you in a good light. Have a look at that one, the black one. That's probably the most realistic of them all. So that's another really cool one here. So this is a Eurhinosaurus. Its name means well-nosed lizard, which is a very interesting name. So this guy is a genus of Ichthyosaur from the early Jurassic, ranging from about 183 to 175 million years ago, with fossils of this guy being found in Western Europe, basically in England, Germany, France, and Switzerland, and are believed to have lived over open sea areas and deep areas as well. And they were quite large. They got to about 7 meters in length, so they're pretty decent size. So it was originally named as Ichthyosaurus longirostris by Gideon Mantell in 1851. and then it was officially given its own genus by Owen and Jaeger in 1856 as well. So that's kind of where it got its name as well. And the genus Eurhinosaurus was actually erected in a paper in 1909 describing a Miocene cetacean, Eurhinodelphis, which is very interesting as well. So it's got its own genus. And then in 2022, they actually got a second genus, second species. Quinstedii comes from Germany. So there's the original species considered dubious due to poor preservation, but Hunii as well is a bit more based on complete skeleton and is resurrected to replace it. So Longirostris is now, it's considered the type, was considered the type, but it's dubious. So now it's Hunii and Quinstedii. So yeah, as I mentioned, quite a big animal. Large-bodied, small-toothed, quite slender ichthyosaur. The vertebral column had about 50 precaudals, 45 tailstock, and less than 100 fluke vertebrae. What really sets us apart, it's got that really, really long upper jaw, and its lower jaw was weak but much shorter, and so it had an extreme overbite. Very much, like swordfish, and there's a lot of comparisons there. Huge orbits like other ichthyosaurs, probably good eyesight. Things like that. It also has elongated, straight, and slender teeth as well, and which is interesting as well. A very large supratemporal in view as well. And compared to like Stylivotite and Temnodontosaurus, it had a small fluke as well, which is interesting. That's cool about it. In terms of who it's related to, it's also related to Escalabosaurus and Leonistus, and also Temnodontosaurus, so it is in Neo-Endotixian. Ichthyosauria, I mean. So in terms of its feeding mechanics, because its morphology was intermittent between super fast swimmers and slower, more flexible predators, it very much seems to be in similar ecology to basically a prehistoric swordfish, and would have used its upper teeth to make damage to damage smaller prey. So that's kind of how it worked. It's basically just a prehistoric swordfish. And like other species of ichthyosaurs, it was a high-speed swimmer and would have used, its rostrum to kind of knock onto things before eating them. Its relatively large hilums suggest they would have used for steering and probably propulsion at low speeds. They were turgiform, so they very much had a very, very short tail, so swam more like tuna and sharks, not like anguilliforms like eels. But yeah, they're doing quite well, and they got those big eyes. They were probably a deep diver, so those large eyes would allow them to kind of see deep underwater. And in terms of its paleo environment, it was definitely pelagic, like modern swordfish are today. Lived far from the coastline, and fossils of it have been found in limestone, things like that. So it would have lived in very open environments, and probably fed on a lot of soft-bodied fish or smaller fish, things like that. Very similar things to what modern swordfish and sailfish eat today. But yeah, really, really cool. Another cool species that we get to talk about. So you run off and do your thing. And last but certainly not least, we have got Moanasaurus. So there's something from my neck of the woods, done by Sweetener. A few people commented that I missed it, but I didn't miss it. I was saving it. And there is something wrong with it, which I'll get into. So this is Moanasaurus. So this is actually one from New Zealand, in fact. So it's nice to have something from my neck of the woods in the game. So this is Moanasaurus. For Māori is Moana, sea, and Greek lizard. So it's Moanasaurus, the lizard. These guys are a genus of mosasaur that comes from the late Cretaceous. We'll have a look at this one because it's posed quite nice for us. I like that pose. And it covers up the tail, which is what's wrong with this one. Its fossil remains were discovered in the North Island of New Zealand. And Moanasaurus is described to be very large, with the holotype being a disarticulated skull, vertebrae, ribs, and flipper bones. The skull itself was about 78 centimeters, or 31 inches in length, and actually shows it was one of the largest mosasaurines, which is the group that includes Mosasaurus and its relatives. And some large Antarctic mosasaurs have been referred to this genus. And 2 additional species have been named, with Moanasaurus hobertinensis and Moanasaurus lorostris, but they are Nomenubia before they were named in a PhD thesis. The same thesis argued that Mosasaurus flemingii is a genus synonym of Moanasaurus mahonii, so something like that. I don't actually know how to pronounce that, but it has got a few different interesting names to it. But the type is described by Joan Whiffen. If you've ever heard of Joan Whiffen, she is considered the dinosaur or dragon lady of New Zealand. She found quite a few fossils somewhere down, the Tararoa Formation. I believe that's where it was found. That is in kind of the central North Island, and it's a very interesting formation. It's mostly marine, so they got a lot of marine reptiles found from there, but there's also a few dinosaur bones, and that's where pretty much most of the dinosaur bones in New Zealand have been found. That is Moanasaurus manohuagie, I believe. It's that I know a little bit of Māori, but it's kind of hard with how they Latinize it, so I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, I got to say what's wrong with it. So yeah, for the most part, it is a really nice one. But I got to say the tail is a bit off. So this is the early interpretation of how mosasaur tails used to be, just a giant big paddle. And that was until we actually got soft tissue impressions of mosasaur tails, and we know they had flukes more similar to things like sharks and ichthyosaurs, rather than the paddle tails like a sea snake. So that's the only thing really wrong with this guy, but other than that, still quite cool. Big fan. So we're going to let him run off and do his thing, and then we've got a couple other species to talk about now. So next up we have got Istiodactylus, Istiodactylus, a really interesting one here. So this is a genus of pterosaur. So let's have a little looky-loo here. So this is a funky one. Let's see if we can get him in a good light. Very, very cool. Oh no, we'll have a look at that one. I like the pose of this one. He looks very cool. Anyway, let's have a look. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Zoom out. There we are. Very good. So, Istiodactylus, these guys are a genus of pterosaur that lived in the early Cretaceous about 120 million years ago, and is found from the Isle of Wight. So if you know things like Iguanodon and Polacanthus and Baryonyx, this is where it was found. It was found in 1887, and in 1901 the holotype specimen of a new species, Olatidens, in the genus Eurhinosaurus, and then it was moved to its own genus Istiodactylus in 2001, with the name in Greek meaning sail finger, and more specimens have been described in 1913, and Istiodactylus is actually the only pterosaur known from 3-dimensionally preserved fossils for much of the 20th century, and there was also a species found in China called Sinensis, but then it was given its own genus. Very, very cool animal. So as I mentioned, 1887, it was found by Harry G. Seeley, who found a fossil Sinosacrum, or fused vertebrae, across the pelvis in the Wessex Formation of the Isle of Wight, and he compared it with those of dinosaurs and pterosaurs and believed it to actually be a bird, and he named it Osteodermis culatus, but then was actually found later. It was the British geologist John W. Hulk actually found it as a pterosaur. And then the first popular book of Dragons of the Air kind of talked about this guy as well. So this is actually one of the very first pterosaurs kind of in popular culture. So it's very interesting. It has a bit of a taxonomic history. Some other species have been redescribed. And now the species that I mentioned, Sinensis, is now considered Longipteris, which is another species of pterosaur. In the same group, though. Mark Whitten also kind of reported the rediscovery of a jaw piece as well, found while he was visiting museums as well, so that's quite cool. And in terms of its description, though, that's a very interesting taxonomic history, but a very long one. It is quite a large for a pterosaur. It got about 4.3 to 5 meters, or about 14 to 16 feet, and is the largest known of its family. Some isolated wings suggested it may have got to about 8 meters, so that's still quite large. And the most complete skull is fragmentary and is thought to be about 45 centimeters or 18 inches in length. So yeah, it's still quite cool. in terms of its, anatomy, things like that, this is pretty spot on for what we know of it. The only issue is, yes, it's not covered in pectin fibers, and I kind of wish, we had kind of a cool kind of in the original game, or hopefully in JWE3. I would love to have like a kind of accurate version where you could just put feathers on as a cosmetic. I think that'd be quite cool. Like the feather T-Rex, kind of thing like that. The skull itself was relatively short and broad compared to most of the pterosaurs. It had a short, low snout region in the nostrils as well, and had a very large neo-abdominal fenestrae, so a large kind of hole in there. It's kind of lightened the weight of the skull. So you can see it's got a very interesting skull there, very more like a triangle, which looks quite cool. It had 48 semicircular teeth. They were kind of like petal-like, with sharp crowns. They're very similar, probably well adapted for eating fish. And it was considered, and quite similar to those of one of the current kind of pterosaurs, not too different in that regard. In terms of its classification, it is its own group in the Istiodactylus, so it's kind of where it got that, and it found that L.U.C.A and L.C.A are now considered to be sister taxons, so it could be different species or different genera, but very interesting as well. So very long taxonomic history. And all of these deposits for this group, the Istiodactylids, all come from the Northern Hemisphere, by dating from the early Cretaceous. And the ones for China as well, they've also been found in Spain. And the late Cretaceous genus Mammoth is actually the first one known from Gondwana, so they seem to have been a little bit more common as well. And there's actually 2 fossils coming from the formation as well that were thought to be Istiodactylids. There was one from the Morrison Formation, but they were actually found to be other groups of pterosaurs, which is quite interesting. There's been also a lot of research looking to their feeding, because these guys were kind of the originator of, the meme of them being fish eaters, potentially like wading around like herons, storks, and skimmers. But the most recent evidence suggests that they may have been eating kind of vertebrate animals, and they looked at the microwear of these teeth and it's just they would have been closest to the carnivorous reptiles. So they could have potentially been eating fish and small, animals, things like that. So very, very interesting. Where it kind of fits the best is these carnivorous reptiles. So probably would have been eating a lot of fish and maybe a lot of scavenging, depending. If it seems to have that ecology of, similar to rhamphorhynchids or the chirids. That's quite interesting as well. In terms of environment, it lived in the Wessex Formation in the Weldon Group about 120 million years ago. Would have lived in a river system, so it makes sense. A lot of fish for them to eat. It was very much like a savanna kind of habitat with ginkgos, conifers, and angiosperms. Would have lived with a lot of very famous dinosaurs and other animals, Neovenator, Polycanthus, Hypsilophodon, Iguanodon, one of those very famous animals, and obviously a very rich formation. We know quite a lot about the Weldon Group, with lots of mammals and turtles and crocodiles and fish and gastropods and all that. So it was a very, very rich formation filled with a lot of cool animals. But yeah, that's Istiodactylus done. That's one done by Trippy. Trippy did a good job, and Sweetener. I don't think I actually mentioned Sweetener did that one as well. The Moanasaurus, really, really cool one there. But last but certainly not least, this one's a bit of a collaborative effort. We have got the woolly mammoth, or Mammothus primogenus, which is the scientific name for the woolly mammoth, done by Peter Otter, Johnny V, and Chocolate. So let's have a look at the woolly mammoth. Yeah, look, all these woolly mammoths. Definitely putting the woolly and woolly mammoth. They did a really great job with these mods. Definitely a big fan. So we'll have a look at this grey one. This grey one's my favourite, and he looks so pretty there. So look how pretty you are. Amazing. Beautiful tusks. Anyway, so the woolly mammoth, I'm not going to go too into it because there's a lot that we know about the woolly mammoth. It's probably the most well-known prehistoric animal, I'd argue, even more than T-Rex, because we have genetics and so many preserved specimens. It's probably the most well-known prehistoric animal. but I'll give you the good lowdown and talk about a good summary of it all. Um, and I've also covered it quite well. If you go back and look at my kind of history, especially my Planet Zoo mods, that really great mod that NDP Designs did for Planet Zoo, I really went in depth as one as well. There's also a couple other mammoths I've covered, so we'll give it the lowdown. But I think it deserves a good mention because it's a beautiful mod, and I really like to talk about these mammoths. So the woolly mammoth, or Mammothus primogenus. These guys are an extinct species of mammoth that lived from the Middle Pleistocene right up until the Holocene, and is one of the last living species, last in line of mammoth species belonging to, with the African mammoth. Begins with the African mammoth, Mammothus subplaniformis in the early Pliocene. So these guys would have diverged from the steppe mammoth, which is another close relative of mammoths, quite large too. They lived for about 800,000 years ago in Siberia, and its closest living relative is the Asian elephant, where there's about 6 million years of divergence, so same between us and a chimpanzee, so quite similar. Its close relative, the Columbian mammoth, would have lived alongside it in North America, but in most of its range it would have either lived by itself or maybe with some small populations of steppe mammoths. And they are believed to also hybridize with Columbian mammoths as well. We have evidence of that, and actually the Columbian mammoth may be the result of hybridization between steppe mammoths and Columbian woolly mammoths. But yeah, Columbian mammoths did hybridize them when they met each other in North America and created hybrids, and we know those. They were originally called Jefferson's mammoths, but we know from genetics and stuff and from morphology they were most likely actually hybrids of woolly mammoths and Columbian mammoths, so that's quite cool. Shown by DNA studies, which is quite cool. Mammoths in general remains were long known from Asia before they were known by Europeans, and the origins were long debated. Some thought mammoths were like giant moles, and it really wasn't until George Cuvier that I actually identified them as a extinct elephant species in 1796. And the behavior and appearance of the woolly mammoth is mentioned among the best studied of any prehistoric animal, since we have a lot of frozen carcasses, as well as skeletons, teeth, stomach contents, dung, and depictions of them in life from prehistoric cave paintings. So we had ancient peoples that saw them and understood them, because that means they lived alongside them. In terms of its size, they're roughly the same size as modern African elephants. They were a bit bigger than Asian elephants, but yeah, pretty much the same size as modern elephants, though there were other mammoth species like the Columbian mammoth and the steppe mammoth were bigger. The males reached a shoulder height of between 2.6 and 3.4 meters, or between 8 and 11 feet tall at the shoulder, and weighed between 3.9 to 8.2 tons. So basically the same sort of size range of modern African elephants. While females stood on average about 23 to 26 meters, or about 7 to 8 feet tall in shoulder height, and would have been about 2.8 to 4 tons. A newborn calf would have been born at 90 kilograms. And unlike modern elephants, which are well adapted for warm environments, these guys are very well adapted for cold environments, present during the glacial periods of the last ice age, being covered in fur with an outer layer of guard hairs and a shorter undercoat. And we do know a lot about the colours of these coats. They had very similar hair genes to us. So you would have got blonde mammoths, brunette mammoths. I like this kind of grey mammoth. I like that, so there's a cool design there. They also had short tails and ears to minimise frostbites and heat loss. They also had long curved tusks, much bigger tusks than modern elephants, though these are obviously on the extreme end because these are males. We always like to put the extreme males. Females did have smaller tusks. They had 4 molars, very similar to modern elephants, that kind of replaced throughout 6 times during their life. And from what we know of everything, their behavior was quite similar to modern elephants. They would have been around in matriarchal herds. They would use their tusks for fighting and things like that. So in pretty much most regards, they were very similar to modern elephants. Probably just intelligent as well. In terms of their diet, they would have been eating mainly grasses and sedges, since they lived in open areas. And we know that mammoths lived quite a long time. They could reach about 60 years old, similar to modern elephants. And they lived in a habitat that is now mostly extinct. There are small remnants of it left, but it lived in the habitat that is coined the Mammoth Steppe. So it was during the Ice Age, when the world was a lot cooler but also a lot drier. There was a huge range of grassland, ranging from basically Europe up until Alaska and down into parts of America, North America. So it was a very, very huge habitat, and the mammoth steppe was very important for mammoths because they actually maintained it. So they, knocked down all the trees and moved all the snow and things like that. A lot of other large herbivores like woolly rhinos and horses and bison and camels and things like that. So a lot of large herbivores lived in that habitat, and it was quite important for sequestering carbon and things like that. That's why one of the things they're trying to bring back the mammoths. But yeah, these guys would have coexisted with early humans who hunted them for food. Probably not that often though, and they used their bones and tusks for making art, tools, and dwellings. With the population of woolly mammoths, the mainland population went extinct at the end of the late Pleistocene, about 10,000 years ago. Most other megafauna, kind of the Pleistocene mega extinction. We don't know what happened. There has been hypotheses. Most of them juggle between what climate change, human hunting, and disease. And obviously it could be a multitude of factors. And plus different places probably had different answers, like especially Australia. Australia seemed to be very much driven by climate, because a lot of the large megafauna was actually mostly extinct by the time humans got there. But yeah, one answer doesn't fit all. It's very much complicated, and I could spend hours talking about it. But yeah, the mainland population, what you think of a woolly mammoth, went extinct 10,000 years ago. But there was some populations that managed to survive on isolated islands, and they would have lasted populations on St. Paul Island about 5,600 years ago, and the last population of mammoths on Wrangel Island would have went extinct about 4,000 years ago. So they definitely were around for a good long time and definitely survived. So I think that's more of a call to revive them, I guess. But after extinction, humans love to use the ivory, because you can't use elephant ivory because you have to kill elephants. The mammoth ivory has become quite a popular kind of jewelry item and things like that, and another material. And the completion of the mammoth genome in 2015 actually sparked talking about reviving the woolly mammoth. There's Colossal that's come in and trying to revive them. A lot of the stuff that they talk about the woolly mammoth very sensationalized. It's a cool idea, but in reality, it's going to take centuries because an elephant's pregnant for 2 years, and we barely have an understanding of elephant reproductive biology in captivity. We're only really starting to make captive elephant populations sustainable. So why are you going to try and, we're kind of jumping before we understand. But one of the cool things I'll say about the Colossal and what they've done, I'm very mixed on Colossal. I don't like them very much after what they did for the dire wolf. But I will, give credit where credit's due. They have created a vaccine for the elephant herpes virus, which could be very fatal to young elephants, and they managed to create that based through their study on mammoth DNA. So that's quite cool there, and it has worked. To save the lives of young elephants, so cannot be mad at that. But yeah, there's lots of people trying to revive them and talk about it, but a lot of it's very sensationalized. If any capacity, it won't be happening for the next couple of centuries, just because elephants are very long-lived animals. It takes 2 years for them to gestate. So they try to get them done by 2028. So, if you're going to try and get an elephant pregnant with a baby mammoth, it's going to be by 2028. You're going to have to do it by 2026, to make sure the elephant's actually born and gestated properly. So, we've only got, a year and a bit to get that done. So I don't believe that's happening. But yeah, still a worthy endeavor. I think it's cool for science and all that. And, nothing wrong with more mega mammals in the world, just as long as it's done ethically and everything. That's my take on it. But yeah, really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. So, yeah, we'll let these guys run off and do their thing. Really, really awesome mod. I love these kind of mods and get to talk about these lovely animals. So, yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I'm going to thank everyone. Thank you, Gushy. Thank you, Trip. Thank you, Netraptor. Thank you, Pizza Otter. Thank you, Sweetener. Thank you, Mayo. Thank you, Jasurba. And thank you, Johnny V and Chocolate. You've all done a really wonderful job with these mods. I hope that we've got a couple more parts coming. I know that Hawk Owl is working on a Ceratopsian remaster pack, so that's hopefully going to come out. Should be actually not too far away. I'm definitely going to have to do a thing on that. That's going to be a big, big episode. But I'm excited to cover it because, it's going to be one of the final mods before Jurassic World Evolution 3 comes out. So hopefully get a couple more parts in before that comes out. But, yeah, I Really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always remember to click the little bell icon to get notified when I load anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.